I'll start. How about? So I'm going to turn it over to you to be our MC of everything. But let me just quickly introduce all our speakers first. Thank everybody for coming out on a beautiful day. You could be out playing golf or something to be here to hear about something that's important to the U.S. and Ukraine and to the world. And we are so fortunate to have this wonderful group organized by the Snake Island Institute. Most of y'all know what Snake Island is.
Yes.
It's an island at the beginning of the invasion. Russian warship came up and said, we're about to bomb you. You better surrender. Russian warship to Ukraine Island, and Ukraine Island responded, Russian warship, go F yourself. And so it's an institute that's been recently organized to support the Ukrainian military, which sorely needs all the help and assistance it can get. And these fabulous people that we've been tearing around the state of Alabama. We're kind of halfway through, started in Huntsville and come through Birmingham and up in Tuscaloosa. But we have, I won't try to give you the full names. We have Kat, who is like brilliant data analyst from Stanford, who's Snake Island Institute, and our ranking officer here, Lieutenant Colonel, we'll call him George. That's the best name we can pronounce here. And then I guess a lot of y'all know I'm Stephen Hubbries. I'm an attorney from here, and I've been going back and forth to Ukraine. And anyway, I'll let everybody say their piece for a little bit about what they do, including myself, and then just open it up for questions. And I'll let Marina run the show from
Thank
here.
you so much, Stephen. And I want to start by Thank you so much all for coming. It really means a lot to be able to connect with you all. And I want to start by thanking Stephen and the state of Alabama and all our gracious hosts for having us here. It's very great to be able to connect with people here. Are you mostly all Ukrainian here, or who is American? Can you raise your hand? Okay. Okay. Great. Wow. Because I was not sure. Well, okay, so let me tell you just a little bit about what we do, why we're here. Then we're gonna let our distinguished guests speak for a bit, and then we're gonna take your questions. So if you have any, we'll be very glad to talk about anything that is going on in Ukraine and ask honest questions. Gonna try to answer very honestly about everything. So my name is Steven Sadis Marina. I'm from Ukraine, from Kharkiv. That's the second biggest city in Ukraine, and I actually have also a background in America. I went to high school in Louisiana, so I'm very familiar with South as an exchange student for a year, and then I finished university here and came back to Ukraine right after I graduated because my home country was at war, and I come from a military family, and I've been working for a while on U.S. and America foreign policy, and met a group of wonderful people, Kat and our Commander Vlad, who was not sadly be able to make it today because he was called back to do his important work in Ukraine, and we founded Snake Island Institute, an organization that has the aim to bridge the gap and form deep relationships between America and Ukraine defense and security sectors. So what we do is we represent different units and brigades and organizations like intelligence and Ministry of Defense in Ukraine, and we are doing our best to be their voice here, to be the voice of our military here, of our heroes who sacrificed so much for us and who are fighting for the whole Western civilization really right now against the big evil that Russia is. And we do analytics where we get data from the front lines and we brief members of Congress and Senate. We also have a veterans program, a combat peer-to-peer defense technologies testing program, and advocacy. So this time around we are here in America. We've been in Boston in the National Security Conference. We've been in DC whole last week on the Hill speaking to members of Congress and senators about what is going on in Ukraine. And we thought it'd be really important for us also to take the time to come and thank American people and to talk to Americans and again be the resource for all of you to find out what is really going on. So yes, I want to start by thanking very much everyone. We are very grateful for America for all the help that we've gotten, for standing with us in this of our lives. It does mean a lot, and we use a lot of American weapons and American support that really saves lives, especially the air defense that protects our civilians, our children, like my little sister, for example, and the families of all of us in Ukraine. And I also want to acknowledge that today, even though today is a very religiously holy day, the Palm Sunday, it has started very, very difficultly for us because today Russia targeted the city of Sumy. It's a city in Ukraine, close to Russian border, and they have sent missiles into it in the morning, and so far we have 117 people who have been injured and 24 killed, 2 of them children. And this has been heartbreaking and terrifying because the fight that we have against Russia is the fight for the same values that American people have. We are fighting for an ability to live at our home, for our children to go to school, for us to be able to pray and choose the churches and the denomination that we want freely, for us to be able to choose our representatives and our government freely, for us to be able to pursue the happiness that we want. But unfortunately now we do not have a choice but to stand up to the unprovoked, absolutely unprovoked aggression that launched 3 years ago on a full scale, but has been going on for 11 years now, since 2014, and that's been our life so far. And the fight that Russia has against us is the fight against our values, because they have different values, different from the Western world. The fight for their prestige, and unfortunately they target the most precious things that we have, that Ukrainians hold dear. It's not even about the territory, but it is about our people. Russia has deported, stolen 20,000 of Ukrainian children. That is a confirmed number by UN. The unconfirmed number is around 200,000. And these children are being taken away from their families on checkpoints when their families are trying to leave the territories that are being heavily shelled. They're stolen. They put them in re-education camp. I've personally met these children that were saved back. They put them in camps. They tell them that Ukraine is not a real country, that Ukraine doesn't have the right to exist, that they are Russian, that everything that they've known and their parents is not real anymore. And that is our future, our children. They also target Christians that are not Orthodox Christians. So we have a big population of evangelical Christians, and Catholics, Protestants, all kinds of nations. And if those priests are being found on the occupied territories, so if Russia is able to see them, they're undergoing significant torture. So this war is really an atrocious genocidal war against the people of Ukraine, the children of Ukraine, the values of Ukraine, and that is why we do believe that Russia has to be stopped. But Ukraine is never wanted this war, unlike some of the media that has been going around in some narratives around America. We are very much ready to end this war, and we're willing to end this war. We just want the end to be just and the end to be secure in a way that Ukraine is not invaded in a year and 2 years, because we understand that as long as Russia is going to exist, we're going to have to put up with it. But unfortunately, right now, even though President Trump is trying to bring forward a ceasefire, we see that something that Russia has done this morning does not signal that they want to end the war. It signals that they want to continue killing, and they target the most precious of what we have. Not military objects, not energy, but our children. So please keep supporting us. We really need you all. Keep standing with us. Share our stories, and it just means so much to know that people care on a human level, relate to us and care. Because sometimes it feels like we are completely alone in this fight, in this horrible thing that never was wanted, but we lived through it. And we're not asking American people to come to fight for us, but we ask you to stand with us. Thank you. Here with us, we have two very, very special people who have dedicated their lives to this fight. As Stephen mentioned, Victoria is a combat medic volunteer who's come to us from the front lines, and she's saving lives on the front lines. She's 25 years old, and she has left her very comfortable life on Wall Street in New York City, an American dream life, to save her people, our people. So she's coming directly from the front lines in Ukraine. And Lieutenant Colonel George Kuperashvili is originally from Georgia, has been fighting against Russia in Georgia first, and then came to Ukraine in 2014, has been with us since 2014, has been in Azovstal in Mariupol, has been injured, shot in there, and has been evacuated in a very famous helicopter operation that was very difficult to do. And these two people are the face of Ukrainian resistance and the face of Ukrainian bravery. So I'm going to let them just make very short remarks about themselves, and then we'll be happy to take any questions.
Sure. I guess you've already given a lot of information about us. It's the most important. But thank you all for being here. It means so much to see that you guys are curious to learn about Ukraine and that you guys are supporting us. That's already more than we asked in here. I actually came to the US when I was 15 years old. I went to Texas. So I spent my high school years in Texas, and then I did my bachelor's degree in California, and then, as Marina said, I worked over New York on Wall Street. I'm also very sleep deprived. It's the end of our journey here.
I'm running a mile.
So I'm sorry in advance if I'm being a little slow and a little dumb as well. But I guess my biggest message, I don't have as impressive a military background as George here, or anybody really, or a lot of people in Ukraine. But I do represent the new generation of Ukrainians, the young generation of Ukrainians that were born after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and that understand the importance of speaking our language, being Ukrainian, and giving back to Ukraine. And so my life goals were, first of all, I'm from a small town. Like, my dad is a construction worker, my mom's an elementary school teacher, so we didn't have much. So a lot of my life goals were to give something back to my family, make a name for myself, but a lot of it was also then go back and give back to my home as well. And I was doing this with my career choices and my education choices. And so I bought my family their very first car. And I think that's one of the things I was very proud about. That was a lot for them. Yeah, but I had my whole career ahead and had it all figured out, but then Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, and I just felt like the life they built was empty. It was not as meaningful as I thought it would be when somebody invades your country. So I decided, you know what, this doesn't matter to me anymore. I have to be back and have to be on the ground, part of the resistance. So I found a place for myself in this war, and I decided I'm going to do the honorable job of saving people and saving heroes like George, for example, saving people like this. And I think there's nothing more important that you can do than save somebody's life. And I saved one life. I think my life was worth living. That's why I started doing this. Yeah. Pass it over
So fabulous young generation, and I'm proud of it. First of all, I appreciate that you find the time and came here and invited us to have a little conversation with you. It's an honor, and thank you very much again. Again, my name is George. I'm a commander of the Mechanized Infantry Regiment. was 30 years from military background, starting from Georgia. Continued my military education and background to the U.S. Armed Forces, Texas, Fort Benning, Iraq, Afghanistan, run together. Was a U.S. soldier side to side. And 2014 joined, actually decided to, with my team, help Ukrainians to rebuild new Ukrainian armed forces with a different visions and different values, actually, which you guys all share here in the United States. And we did a couple of projects. I might say the three biggest projects, which were, all of them were successful, and currently we're training the entire Ukrainian armed forces to hand over the success and this training where we can actually share to them. And I think it's more valuable for me would be, because a lot of this was stated, to actually ask questions from you, and if we can answer this. So we'll try our maximum to deliver the information we would like to, answer all of your questions. Thank you.
Okay, and let me, before we throw over to questions, I just want to add a little bit of my perspective as an American going back and forth. First of all, there's nothing more important that you can hear than what you can hear from these people who talk generally. But as we've been traveling together a few days, to hear their specific experiences from the front lines are really amazing, and so it's most important to hear from them and their direct experience from the front lines. I got a little bit of different perspective, being an American who's been going back and forth. So I've been 15 or 16 times back and forth from US to Ukraine. So I have a perspective of going over there, seeing what it's like there, and then coming back to see what the atmosphere is like in the US and what the temperature of American people is for the thank you. Then I just quickly want to make 3 points talking about important dividing lines that I've kind of perceived in my going back and forth. The first dividing line I want to talk about is the American public opinion. When I first started going to Ukraine, it seemed like it was unquestioned that Americans supported Ukraine. They were invaded by this giant neighboring country, Hitler, Stalin style, sending tanks across the border like we've never imagined since 1939, literally with Hitler and Stalin. And it seemed like Americans found it very easy to understand what side to be on the side of the people who wanted to be free, just wanted to not live under a Putin dictatorship. It seemed very easy. But as I've gone back and forth, I think it was in the summer of 2023, I spent almost 3 months in Ukraine, and I remember coming back and finding a very different atmosphere in the United States that had gone from almost 100%, unless you were just a crackpot for Ukraine. Nobody supporting Russia, and then I come back and find that now it's this divisive political issue in the United States, and we're contending with that right now. And can we, get muster, support for Ukraine, and how can we do it, and can we marshal our resources to help Ukraine a little bit, realizing that they're really fighting a battle for us and for the rest of the world to hold Russia back and Putin back, who wants to expand back and take over what used to be the Iron Curtain, at least, if not more. So that's one dividing line that's very disturbing. And when I hear that's been created by a lot of disinformation, so there's another dividing line that I want to talk about that's very important to counter this disinformation that I hear, including I hear it most disturbingly from some of the negotiators our country has sent over there recently, and talk about how, the eastern part of Ukraine, that's really Russian, so it's okay if we let Putin keep that. That's the way to settle things. Let him, take these 4 oblasts or provinces over there. And I think it's, really important to remember this other dividing line of 1991, where Ukraine voted for its independence from the Soviet Union. It had several ramifications. One, it brought about the collapse of the Soviet Union, which we had, struggled for the whole Cold War to try to accomplish. It was Ukraine that did it by voting, we want to be independent of this, what Reagan called evil empire of the Soviet Union. And that was what immediately caused the collapse of the Soviet Union. And there were a couple of components that I think is very important for people to understand about that vote. Well, first of all, around 90% of Ukraine voted to be free from the evil empire of the Soviet Union. And that included majorities in all those eastern provinces that now some people want to say, oh, they're really Russian, or they speak Russian, it's okay, Putin takes those. Those provinces voted by majorities democratically. They did not want to be part of that. And that has a couple of very important components that we hear talked about a lot. One of the arguments you hear against Ukraine, for example, is, oh, corruption, corruption, corruption. Well, I come from a background of a public corruption investigator in the United States. I'm here to tell you there's not a country that has no corruption. And the United States can't say, oh, Ukraine's got corruption, we don't. We have plenty of corruption. We're selling Bitcoin from the Oval Office right now, so that's another whole thing. But that vote in 1991, that was a statement by the people of Ukraine that they wanted to be free of this kind of corruption that pervaded the Soviet Union, because that was a society where you couldn't exist without corruption. There was no real way to live and make a living. You had to be corrupt. You had to pay your teachers for a grade. You had to pay to get, a permit. You had to pay, everything was corruption. And the part of that vote in 1991, so Ukrainians said, we don't want to be part of that. They haven't completely solved all their problems. But I think it's important to understand that that's part of that dividing line, is that we don't want to be part of that system anymore. We want to move in a different direction. And that direction was towards the West and towards Western Europe and towards the United States, and not back towards Russia. They don't want to be part of that anymore. And then the most basic thing about that vote and the dividing line that Americans ought to be able to understand is that Ukrainians were voting in 1981 we just want to be free. We want to be free, she said, to be a Protestant or Orthodox or Catholic. We want to be free to vote for our own president and not have, as has recently happened, Putin try to say Ukraine needs to change its president. Well, Putin's been trying to dictate who the president of Ukraine is going to be for, I don't know, at least the last 20 years. That was part of the revolution of 2014 that they tried to put in, install a puppet who would, take Yanukovych, who would take Ukraine back into the Russian orbit. So all those things in 1991, Ukraine voted no, no, no. We don't want to be part of Russia. We don't want anything about Putin trying to recreate the Soviet empire or Peter the Great's empire or whoever empire he's trying to create. They don't want to be part of that. They don't want to be part of Russia. They're not Russians. Some of them might speak Russian. They're not Russians. They're Ukrainians. They want to be part of Ukraine. They want to move away from that culture of corruption, and they want to just be free, have basic freedoms. Simple as that. And if that's what we did in 1776, so we ought to be able to understand that. The third dividing line that I want to talk about, I could talk all day, I'll just try to be very brief, but I originally, my original purpose in going to Ukraine after the full-scale invasion in 2022, is I spent most of my time in European and Bucha, where the most horrific war crimes you could ever imagine were committed. And So when you talk about a dividing line now, it's like, oh, we're gonna solve this problem by we're gonna draw a dividing line and get part of it on one side to Russia, and the other side gets to, be Ukraine. You need to think about what you're doing to the people on the other side of that line and the atrocities that they're being exposed to, the religious persecution. Ukrainians who are in Russian-occupied territory now, most have friends, family on the other side of the line in free Ukraine, afraid to even call their relatives, afraid to even contact their relatives because of the NKVD, KGB, FSB, GRU apparatus that will come for them if they show any sign of being Ukrainian. So anybody who talks about, oh, we'll just even temporarily draw some line and leave Putin in control of that, you have to think about what you're subjecting those people who want to be Ukrainians, who want to be free, who don't want to be part of Russia. They don't want to live in a country where journalists are thrown off of balconies. They don't want to live in a country where political opponents are shot down in the street in front of the Kremlin or put in prison and die, mysteriously in some prison in the Arctic Circle. They don't want to live in a country where the political opponents are attacked by Novichok nerve agent, all these things that are documented to happen under Putin's Russia. And so everybody thinks, very lightly about, let's just draw a dividing line and leave some people on one side of it. You have to think very carefully about that dividing line and what you're subjecting these people to, who just, want to be Ukrainian, they want to be free, want to move towards the West, want to move away from corruption. As Marina said, they want to be more like us, and so we should support them to do that.
I'm just going to give a quick word to Kat, our head of analytics, to introduce herself.
I'll be very brief and then we'll open it up to questions because that's what we're here for. But I just wanted to say again, thank you. I, along with all of my colleagues, actually was also educated in the US, spent 10 years here, went to high school and university, just graduated last year. And I think that everything that the American people have done for us has been absolutely incredible, above and beyond what we could have expected. I remember moving to the US in 2014 when the first invasion happened and the annexation of Crimea, and the difference in support between when I moved here in 2014 and what happened in 2022 is massive, and I never could have imagined that so many people would have stepped up to support us in this way. I was in the US when the full-scale invasion began, and I remember being completely debilitated because of what was happening and not being able to get up and move and not knowing what was going on, and the community around me across all of the United States that just stepped up with an understanding, even though they might not have been connected to what was happening or even knew anyone in Ukraine other than me. The fact that they stepped up and did everything that they did for us is just one of the things that I admire so much about this country, and I'm very grateful for the 10 years that I spent here because I think it taught me a lot about empathy, about caring for other people, and also about the responsibility that comes with great power. And I think that's something that's been very heartbreaking to see in the last few months, the way that relations have developed. And so I just want to emphasize that again and open it up to questions for you guys so that we can also, answer any questions that you might have, be a resource to you as well, and just say our thanks again.
Great.
We're good?
Any questions?
Yeah,
Please, sir.
for George, I had a couple, since you're from Georgia, I guess that's right, George from Georgia, right?
That's right.
That, I believe Russia's occupied, about 20% of Georgia, just about as much as it's taken of Ukraine. I've got some friends of mine that live in Lithuania and the Baltic states. I can tell you are not real happy about what's going on, because I don't think Putin's gonna stop, even if we give him everything he wants, any more than Hitler did when Neville Chamberlain gave him the Sudetenland. He's not going to stop. So I wanted to get your perspective on that and what's going on in the other countries like Georgia. And my second question is, in retrospect, do you think it was wise for Ukraine to have given up all their nuclear weapons in exchange for guarantees of peace?
What guarantees?
Well, you know what I mean? That was supposedly what it was. You give them up and,
All right, the tricky questions. But anyway, thanks for the question. The true history just repeats. Nothing has changed, might just the dates. The plan for Russia, it works always, and they don't even bother to change it. The approach, because it works for them, it's fine. We'll take an example, Georgia, 90s. I participated in a lot of combats in Abkhazia, South Ossetia, it's in part of Georgia, 20% now is occupied. We had more than like a couple of dozen ceasefire agreements, supported by all over the world. Ceasefire agreements. None of the ceasefire agreements finished up with, we actually finished it with losing the territories, because the Russians never fulfilled these agreements. This is facts. Example, 2008. Unfortunately, world kept quiet. Not really bothered. Georgia is small. Not big deal. It's not next to me. And Georgian government and politicians and people were saying next gonna be Ukraine. And it was. I remember was the president of Georgia went to the UN and he stated that people started laughing. That was. I think 2008 or 9, yeah. People start laughing in the UN, entire world, this guy's crazy. Guess what, it happened. What is our perspective? Giving up the lands? I'm not a person who gathered this land. That's my ancestors who gathered the lands of Ukraine and sacrificed their life. So it's not my call, it's not our call. This call is whoever actually gathered it. But these people gave their lives to bring it until today. Lithuania, Baltic states. All of these 3 small countries, and nobody better than them, and Poland understands current situation today. Because Ukraine is a fence, it's like a big wall who defends Europe right now. And next, there's a couple of course of actions. Couple of scenarios. First, if the world is giving up to Ukraine, this is going to be a good precedent that to say, hey, you can conquer anybody and you can take it whatever. It's legit. So we'll see all over the world countries starting, buying each other, taking away. So we're granting Russia their aggressiveness, even in China, maybe in the future, their move, that it's okay. And Baltic states, they understand clearly, because next, if we don't support Ukraine, and the Baltic states are #1 in the list. They're so small countries, and #1 in the list in the entire world who supports Ukraine. I mean, a small country does more than anybody. So, because they understand feelings are gonna lose their independence, they're gonna lose their countries, they're gonna lose their freedom. And because they are like viciously supporting it. And question will be again, Russia, they have a little 100 kilometers distance between the Königsberg, and 22% of Lithuanian and Latvian population is a Russian language speaking. And world, they know and they share that there is possibility based on current situation and changes that world might say when they attack, for example, Baltic states, they might say, does it really worth to start World War III because it's little 3 tiny countries, like 6 million total? Do we need to send our troops and die there? Just give up to. So who we are is that we decide whose country is gonna give something. I mean, none of the country can decide. Sorry, not US can decide for Ukraine, not Ukraine for US or Georgia, and so on. It's every country. This was created. National identity is what? It's a territory. People living in territory, creating the nation under the one language and history and culture. This is the main pole what it stands for. So destroying this, I mean, it's not a medieval time, so you can go and conquer anybody and kill, and get away with it. I'm sorry, not. So again, the Baltic states and actually the Eastern Europe just understands clearly. Europe needs to wake up as well. And what was the second question? Sorry.
Not giving up your nuclear weapons.
Oh, to reference of nuclear weapons. You see, this is my personal opinion that we should not, but when you have a biggest world leaders, which is the United States, Russia, same time.
And UK.
Yeah, the biggest guys, they're telling you, we guarantee your safety, territorial integrity.
Right.
And Ukraine made a smart move in reference of world without nuclear weapons is really better. I mean, I support, we don't need the nuclear weapons. Nuclear systems for energy, fine, not the weapons, but everything good will create something evil, always. But the Russia, who's supposed to defend and protect Ukrainians' territorial integrity by the agreement, they attacked first. I mean, they attacked. So agreement doesn't mean anything. So we do the agreement now, what guarantees it tomorrow? We had a guarantees and we failed these guarantees. So other entire world nations gonna think that, does it really makes a sense to make a guarantees as a partner to UK, US? Because tomorrow they might, because of national interest, they might say, no, okay, you can, eat them or divide them. So this is quite difficult. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to monopolize, but thank you.
Anything else?
Any other questions?
Please feel free.
Yes, sir.
Question. I'm American, I was born here, I know the region very well. Я говорю по-русски, к сожалению, не по-украински. But I think Americans almost universally side with Ukraine. The problem is that I think most Americans need to hear articulated a reasonable outcome. What do you see as not only the ideal outcome for this conflict, but one that's realistic? And what is needed to achieve it? Is it sanctions? Is it a political decision? Or is it going to require military intervention, either from the United States or Europe, without escalating unacceptably?
Question.
Anybody?
Specific?
If anybody has an answer to that question, I'd be thrilled to hear it.
Let me start and then maybe they can add. Look, Russia doesn't want to end this war. Even though the administration is really trying, we can see with their actions, not just their word, they don't want to end this war. And you gotta understand that this is gonna be my personal perspective. I think the administration and President Trump has signaled this a lot of times, that they're looking at this as a deal making, right? And President Trump is transactional and he's about money and resources, and that is okay, that is all right. Putin is not. And it is very, very dangerous to view Putin and Russia as someone who is pursuing money. They're pursuing prestige. They're pursuing their own values, if we can call them that. And that's why we don't see anything on any levels that they are actually ready. What they want is to be recognized by the world. And what the administration, we had meetings with the Department of State, Ukraine team this week, and with people close to the administration. And what we've heard is that the current administration is trying to do a reset with Russia while also helping Ukraine. I personally am really not sure something like that is going to work. Because you just can't bring Russia back to the world geopolitical game to make them a valuable partner in everything, right? And lessen the sanctions, whatever, and just hope that they're going to be like giving you what you want. At the same time, we hear some signals from the administration. For example, I think it was today or yesterday that President Trump posted, it was Rubio, I think today, that called the current attack on Sumy as like Russian aggression, and we're hearing that President Trump is becoming more frustrated. That being said, we are confident we can win. The thing is, we need some levels of support. We don't want American people to, and we understand why it's difficult. You live your life here, you have your own problems, and frankly, we hear that you guys have a lot of your own problems, right? Well, that's what everyone keeps talking about. And we understand that your taxpayer money has to go to your country. What we want is to be partners, and that's what we are really pressing in the military. Like, I'm speaking on behalf of not our administration political, but on behalf of myself and also the military and our organization, is we want to be partners, and we want this to be partnerships, because Ukraine right now, like any, for example, drone that has not been tested in Ukraine is not efficient in the world. Ukraine has done so much in its defense efficiency, in its production and stuff, that we can bring a lot to the table as well. And we want America to invest in Ukraine. We personally think that a refined version of the minerals deal would be a good thing in a way that it could bring American investment to Ukraine. So we agree with that. We want to purchase American weapons, and we do think that Europe has to do more, because this is on the European soil, and frankly, America has helped us much more in some sorts than Europeans have, while they are in the imminent threat. So we support all of the arguments, right? The question is, how is it done? So for example, there is Russian assets that have not been seized, right? That could be used to buy weapons from America, and we think that is fair and that is a way, right? The other thing is sanctions. Again, we know from our history, from years of trying to make deals with Russia, from the Minsk agreements, from all the talks, that the only thing that Russia understands is strength. And I'm gonna speak for myself now. I do not believe that there would be a ceasefire agreement soon without showing strength to Russia, without being tough on Russia, without having sanctions on Russia. Ukraine is ready to end this any day. Around a month ago, President Trump said, let's do a ceasefire, and our President Zelensky said, okay, we can do an unconditional ceasefire. We didn't ask for anything. We were like, okay, we'll stop. You stop, please, right? We don't see a ceasefire. When we were asked to do a energy and infrastructure ceasefire, again, I'm going to be very honest with you, that was a bad deal for Ukraine. We didn't win anything out of that thing, even though we agreed to it, to show that we are ready to end this and we are ready to put our actions where our mouth is. Because that type of ceasefire on the sea, we already won the war on the sea. We do not have a fleet, but we control over 30% of the Black Sea. Like, to have a Black Sea ceasefire means to give Russia an ability to be active there. We have one there. Energy infrastructure. So what they do is the energy ceasefire means that we cannot target their logistical hubs, energy infrastructure. That really helps us to prevent, lower their ability to fight. They are just gonna say they're targeting military targets and bomb our children. Nothing is gonna change for us. So, I mean, we are doing everything we can, but we think that the answer to this war is for America and for all our allies to be very, very tough on Putin and on Russia. That being said, again, our belief is that we are trying to be realistic. We're not trying to come here and say, let's get all the money in the world, let's fight till the last drop, let's get Crimea and Donbass. I gotta speak for myself at this moment. I personally believe that we have to be realistic and understand that there are some ways in which we maybe don't get all of our territories back, but also they are not internationally recognized as part of Russia. And then Ukraine has an ability to rebuild itself, to get our military stronger, to build our security infrastructure and ecosystem in the way that we can then explore other ways to get those territories back. But the thing is, we need the war to end. We are we still have contracted weapons from the last supplemental coming to Ukraine that's gonna last till the end of the summer. But since after August, I'm not sure what's gonna happen, and I see that there's not gonna be another supplemental. That's what we're getting, the information. Speaker Johnson, I quote, said there is no appetite for it. And we are, again, I personally believe that we should buy that with Russian frozen assets, and that's what we are really pushing Europe to do right now. But some European countries are also scared to seize those assets because they think that's going to bring a lot of legal issues and stuff. So that, do you guys want to add anything? That's perfect. Yeah.
Just with respect to when you talk to your congressman or senator in terms of what the American commitment to Ukraine, first off, in '94, there was the Budapest Agreement, which U.S. was a signatory to support Ukraine and defense of its territorial integrity. And since '22, the U.S. has had 4 different appropriations that totaled $113 billion. And that basically equates to less than 5% of the annual U.S. defense budget. And that to me is a very effective investment in decimating the military of one of our greatest enemies, which is Russia. And so when you speak to your congressmen or senators, share that with them, that it's an investment in a stronger U.S. And absent that, if things continue as they are, and then it becomes the Baltic states or Germany or France or what have you, the estimate is over the next 5 years, the U.S. will spend over $800 billion in trying to restrain Russian aggression. So those are the choices.
Another thing to highlight here is that around 70% of the money spent for military aid to Ukraine actually stays within the United States in order to produce, not even to produce what you send into Ukraine, but to replace what you're sending to Ukraine, because the things you're sending are not the things you're currently using.
Right, and you gotta understand that there is this misconception that you guys are pouring so much money into Ukraine and stuff. At the same time, by the end of 2024, we received roughly, so the supplemental was 60 billion. Most of the supplemental money that was passed last year, right, out of 60 billion, most of the money was staying in America, investing in American companies and long-term contracts. Then there was money there for support for like grain in African countries, because they get less grain now. So you gotta understand, this is not, like, we're not getting that money, all of it. And then there was, under the previous administration, a very, very slow process of sending us aid. So in the end of 2024, I'm gonna try, like, this is gonna be roughly the number. We got weapons at around like 10 billion out of 60. So we are not, like, we understand that it seems like all this money are being poured, and at the same time we're not winning still, but we had so much constraints during this war. A lot of them coming from the previous administration, where we would be given something and then we would not be able to use it. For example, F-16 planes, but we got the planes, but we didn't get training spaces for our soldiers. I personally worked on that whole last year, where we would be coming and asking to train our pilots so that they are able to fly it. Or when we were given the long-range missiles, but we were not allowed to use it on Russian territory at all, right? So there's a lot of process of also how this aid works and how it's allowed. So now what I'm hearing a lot on the Hill from the Republican members of Congress, they say that yes, it was not right to put restrictions on our allies. But that happened because of this fear of escalation. There's huge fear that this is going to lead to World War III, that Russia is going to retaliate back. But every single line of escalation that happened, and then after, like, you know, we got the F-16s, we got the long range, we invaded a nuclear country, they didn't do anything back. And that fear of escalation comes from a very Russia-centric, I think, approach to this war, and like lack of understanding of also Ukrainian history and the deep of our relationship, because Russia is a bully. And unfortunately, Russia was able to bully the United States into not standing up very strongly against it. Because, I mean, Kursk, that's the biggest example, I think, to this point, where we literally invaded that country and they're weak. And then when we show strengths, we are able to do great things.
Yeah, another, when it comes to military aid, another thing where we can be a resource as Ukrainians. I mean, our most valuable asset right now is our experience and our information analytics. We are one of the 2 countries in the world who know how to fight a modern war right now. It's us and Russia. And hopefully we stay allies, right, as we already know, and we will be the ones helping the rest of the world learn from our mistakes and learn from our experience. And so one of the things that we can be a resource at is understanding the modern defense technology that comes into efficiency and sending military aid. So instead of maybe in the future sending some old traditional defense resources like tanks, for example, some countries will be able to get to a point where the drones are efficient enough to be used in Ukraine. They cost a lot less, and they can make a lot bigger impact. So we, specifically the project I am working on right now, we're doing peer-to-peer testing with defense tech companies around the world, especially for them to help understand what works under fire or what works on a battlefield, because most of the new technology things that are being sent from outside of Ukraine to Ukraine are not working.
Well, let's try to.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was. Hopefully that answered your
Oh,
question.
well, two things, and I don't mean to diminish in any way the huge importance of preserving your culture, because it benefits us too, I think. But one thing I remember hearing at the beginning was about the rare earth minerals, and I wondered if you all would remind us all of what they are and why it is so important that the whole world the civilized world have access to them. I mean, so that we would like to purchase your rare earth minerals. And so, to me, that's one of those points that I don't think we know enough about. And I can't even remember what they are now, but I know they're very important. And
Neither do I.
oh, okay. Oh, well, that's
we
okay.
have someone who knows.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not gonna be able to list every single one. Just give an overview because this is all also publicly available, but I think the biggest and most important supply that we have is lithium.
Thank you.
Which is important for batteries, and the reason that lithium in particular and the Western capacity to produce batteries is extremely important is because that is one of the capabilities that is primarily produced in China, and China has almost complete control over lithium reserves in the entire world. And if you actually look at how difficult it is to make batteries made in the US, made in Europe, even made in Ukraine, it's incredibly difficult. But batteries are in everything that we use. Batteries are in everything that we use, not only in day-to-day consumer electronics, but also in our defense systems. So for us to be able to domestically manufacture our own drones and domestically manufacture our own defense systems, we need those minerals. And if the US is serious about wanting to onshore its domestic production and also wanting to kind of reindustrialize within allied countries, then having access to those kinds of minerals and having a friendly supply chain is incredibly important, which is another reason, why we want to position ourselves as a country that can give back and as a country that is an ally, because we understand the concern that the US has about depending on supply chains from authoritarian countries, and we actually have a capability to help with that. And also a lot of the other rare earth minerals that we have are incredibly important in other parts of consumer electronics in general. So, a lot of concerns about making chips primarily in China or Taiwan and trying to onshore that into the United States as well. So the general idea here is that we could be a really big resource in kind of having a democratic supply chain, rebuilding the arsenal, reindustrializing the democratic world with your allies instead of depending on countries that you do not want to be dependent on. So that's a way that we can help you.
Thank you.
Guys, how do you think we can be, as a regular people here in Birmingham, Alabama, resourceful or, helpful, more effective, especially in this difficult political internal situation, that we live in as of today in the United States, to, promote and help, democracy and freedom overall and for Ukraine?
Thank you. That's a great question. Thank you so much for asking ways to actually be helpful. So the way, well, I'm not going to teach you on how American politics works, but the way American politics works is that your voices as constituents matter. So actually yesterday we had a dinner with Congressman Gary Palmer from this district. So Congressman voiced supportive opinions about Ukraine. At the same time, he, for example, didn't vote for Ukraine aid in the last supplemental. So I think personally, and maybe anyone else has a different opinion, that very effective right now is to show that the people, the American citizens, support Ukraine, and they are very unsupportive of Russia, and because the administration and all your government representatives care and a democracy about what you think. At least I hope so. I'm really hoping. So calling your representatives, meeting with them, and saying that U.S. constituents care and sending them letters, I think would be the most effective way right now for the advocacy. Stephen, maybe you have.
Yeah, and I'd just add to that, I'd personally like to see, this is I hope the beginning of a program that's intended to educate Americans. There's so much, positive knowledge Americans need about Ukraine, and especially Ukraine versus Russia. And the other side that I did not mention is there's also so much incredible disinformation flowing everywhere that you've all heard. Ukraine started the war, for example, and heard, some discouraging comments that, one reason that it's impossible to get a Ukraine aid package through the Congress now is that the discourse has been poisoned by people who were not named, but we know their names, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and people like that, who have poisoned the discourse. And I don't agree that we should cede the field to them and their disinformation, that there needs to be a lot of pushback. I think there need to be, bigger forums like this, bigger education forums, more media exposure, more grassroots organization. We saw this, protest, was it last weekend, that, that weren't directed at Ukraine, but I think that that's one of the, major kind of breaking points that I think, Americans maybe disagree with the direction that the government leadership is headed towards of, giving everything to Putin and giving everything to Russia, allowing, for example, Russia got no tariffs because they said it was inappropriate to put tariffs when they were trying to have ceasefire negotiations, but they put tariffs on Ukraine. So that kind of negative imbalance, there needs to be, a protest and a pushback against all of that. And I think that needs to become one of the major fault lines in American politics. And so I thank all of y'all for, being out here today to listen. I think this is a part of something we're just starting, and I hope, we can come back and go from, 40 people to 400 people to 4,000 people and start spreading it out and having it more in the media, that Americans do not agree with what appears to be some kind of realignment of our interest with Russia over our other allies.
For example, as I said, currently it's a different world. We have more tools, and one of the biggest weapons today all of us has in our hands is the cell phones, which is the social media. And your opinion, before maybe like 7 years ago, we're supposed to go outside in front of the Congress or White House, to get heard. But today we have a better tool. We can spread the information. We can deliver the message to everybody. So who's going to explain in reality what is going on. And every congressman or senator, they are just our speakers. We gave them the voices, our voice, and they're supposed to actually announce what the voters voted for. And that's exactly what we're asking, to talk to them and deliver your message. And they might change your mind and say, yeah, my voters, my district wants this way, and I'm working for my people, not for myself. And one of the biggest regrets as I have that what would have happened if 39, it was mentioned, Chamberlain was not so weak, and U.S., for example, supported. How many people wouldn't have returned back or never went to the war. Millions and millions. So now we have this exact line. Right now, nothing gonna happen. But the decisions which we didn't take it now, and we might take it now, is gonna affect these little kids for 5, 10 years after. And they will go on the front lines in again, more than 20 and 30 and 40 million is gonna die. Because we just got lazy or didn't want to proceed. It's gonna touch us. When the fire is going in the neighborhood, you gotta participate to put it down. Oh, it's not my house, it's too far away, I'm good. No, you gotta call and say, hey, we gotta prevent that. We gotta do something preemptive. And a lot of lives will be saved. Just it is.
Is there anything else?
So I have a question. So first of all, I'm here for a long time. I actually had a chance to serve in the Soviet Army right before the collapse. One of my best friends was from Georgia and from Russia. Unfortunately, with all the security events, I could not able to get in touch with some of them. But what population of Ukraine, what are their sentiment about making a deal? Do they ready to see some territory to Russia? It's number one. Number two, does that present like, would Zelensky get blamed to making a deal, and then we'll have a chance to push Zelensky out through the election and other means, install someone more friendly to the Putin regime? It's kind of a two-level question.
First of all, as we said, Ukrainian nation is willing to fight. Not because we want to fight, but because we want to stop the fight. This is one. Second, because my home, when the robbery going and somebody got you in your house, you don't say, okay, take one room and I'm fine with you. You can take my wife as well. Anyway, she's still annoying. so it's not a way it works, right? So this is mine. This is my house, not built up by me. I just put one brick. This was given to my father, grandfather, and the others, and I'm just making it better. But I'm not extending it nowhere. I just have my fence and my house and my territories I know, but taking it, yes, I mean, we'll fight all the way. We're not asking the U.S. for a presence of U.S. troops or any other troops from other countries. No, we have enough manpower. We will fight. We will finish up. And the myth and rumors that Russia is so unstoppable, in 2022, we showed the world that it's fake. It could be stopped. And we just need the weapons to force him to understand. Difference, I'm gonna have one example. When you have a dog in the yard or neighborhood, just mad dog and tries to bite you, what you gonna do? You're gonna take a stick, hit him once, and he'd understand, right in the teeth. He understands, you have a stick and you are strong. Bite second time, no. Might avoid him, or just bypass him, never gonna do this guy. To be strong, it's not only means to have a wheel. It's got to have some resources, such as stake. You have to have a wheel who will defend that. And again, I'm saying, cockroach born in a kitchen, it doesn't mean the kitchen belongs to him. It's a fact. So I have my territory, and I just I'm fighting for my territory, and nobody wants to, more than Ukrainians, more than me as a military, stop this war. Because every second I'm losing my personnel, my brother nerves. Because I know what it is, and I want to stop this war. But we're socialized, we're explaining what's a normal, like US does perfectly, the other normal nations. They explain in Russia, please let's go to the diplomatic solutions. No. After they put the sanctions, right? We're trying to normal people sanctions. We're not going straight with a stick and hit him in the head, right? So we're trying to explain some pressure a little bit to, think a little bit. But he doesn't want to think. He has ideas that he wants it, and he's gonna take it, whatever will be paid for. Anything for he wants. But what do we do? Okay, you can bite me, you can, take my leg off, and I'll be fine. I'll ask my neighbor, you fine? Yeah, I'm fine. And after it's gonna be him. Also, that's what I'm saying. We cannot give up. We're not a people in any country allowed to decide for each other. We can help each other to stop in the future that any neighbor can't do such thing. I just can't even imagine. Imagine Mexico decides to take Texas. Yeah, that's okay. California says that's okay.
No, that would be
Yeah.
okay.
Alamo was a symbol to fight, and it was a symbol, and it went for a national roots. This is mine. But U.S. not going to other countries to occupy and taking the land back or people or anything, right? We're just trying to keep it there.
What, Greenland?
It didn't happen, so it's just it's still a theory. So anyway, I mean, we're trying to be civilized, really civilized. Delivers a message. Again, don't attack our fleet. We said, okay, we will not attack our fleet, but we don't have a fleet. So what you gonna? I mean, you gotta not attack something. No, we're not gonna attack your fleet. I don't have it. I don't care. We don't attack. Okay. Don't attack energy resources, infrastructure. Okay, we're ready. They say, no, they're still shooting. A week or two ago, 9 kids died on a playground. Playground which is not surrounded for maybe tens of dozens of miles, so there's no any military infrastructure there. It's a playground for the kids. Today, yesterday, I could show us every day the rockets going and going and going. Does he really want to do the negotiation to stop the war? No, because it's not a purpose to stop the war. He was a person who publicly stated that where the border of Russia ends. He says never, I mean nowhere. Whatever we decide. Is that an answer? I mean, no. So we are ready for it and we're ready to fight and we have all the resources that except there is some fields which you need to help us. As well, there is a unfortunate technological development currently in Ukraine, as the lady said, which you need the help from us because we are far away developing the drone systems. US currently, in the back, and this development is changing the battle space really badly. It's going to affect the human resource. It's going to affect the factories, economy, everything. So.
We're sorry. Okay, if I may add with the less entertainment example, an anecdote, I guess. The majority of my community within the military that I work with are actually young people from occupied territories, or people whose families are in occupied territories right now. In Zaporizhia region, Kherson region, Donetsk, and so on. And so their biggest idea is to fight to see their families, is to fight to see their hometowns again, to go back to their apartment. One of my best friends, he carried a Ukrainian flag with him all the time that he brought from Donetsk when he was 10 years ago now. And he had the biggest dream of bringing that flag back to Donetsk. And there are so many stories like this. Another anecdote, less entertaining, less interesting, but from another close friend of mine that I fought together with. I was lucky to save his life in 2023, but he unfortunately was killed in 2024. He was young, and he is from Zaporizhia region, which is the part that's occupied right now. And so for me now, my biggest dream is to go and see his family. His family cannot leave. They've been trying for 3 years now, but Russians and all that allowed them to leave the territory. So for me now, biggest dream is to ever see his hometown. There are so many stories and anecdotes like this from around Ukraine. So for me, it's emotionally, it would be very difficult to say anything about territory negotiations.
I have sort of a hindsight question in that Do you think Ukraine would have been invaded had the Crimea, had the world more or less focused on Crimea and said, no, you can't have Crimea? Would that have set a precedent?
I think
Because there
so,
was
yeah.
very little world response to that. It was like, oh yeah, take it.
Yeah, look, the little responded to Georgia invasion, to Crimea. Putin was trying a little bit, but a little bit. And then nothing. So that what's gonna stop you from invading the whole country, right?
Yeah, that's
And
what I
now,
said.
even more, if Russia is not stopped in Ukraine, what's gonna stop him from invading the rest of the Europe? What's gonna stop China from invading Taiwan? Yes, 100%. I think there's the big reason why this invasion happened is the lack of strong response.
World support
Because
for
again,
Crimea.
Putin understands strengths.
And do you consider Crimea part of Ukraine or?
Absolutely.
Yes, we do.
100%.
I just wanna add on that, because it also goes back to the escalation question that we had earlier. And I kind of think that if you zoom out a bit and don't just look at the last 3 years, but the last 10, or even counting Georgia, the last, I don't know, that's 13, 14.
No, it's on all.
Yeah, I think that like
Since the end of the Cold War.
historical precedent shows that things escalate when there's appeasement. So it's not just what we've seen over the last 10 something years in Eastern Europe, but even before in Europe during World War II. So when I personally get questions about escalation, I'm like the escalation happened. It started in 2008, escalated in 2014, escalated in 2022, and it escalated because we kept appeasing it and because we kept giving carrots and not enough sticks. And so I think that like, yes, I do think it would have gone differently if we had responded differently to Crimea, and I do think that escalation could happen again if we don't end things now.
I think it definitely will.
You have in Moldova also. In the future, in Moldova, you have a future.
Well, I think that there's gonna be, they're gonna need something in the middle.
Let's take the last two questions, okay? Yeah, please, ma'am.
I have a question. The big problem for me starting in 2014 is missing from my family. My mother and father were born in outskirts of Luhansk. So my aunt still lives there. A lot of my first cousins live there. I was born and raised in Moldova, in Transnistria. My father was Soviet military pilot. So I'm military child. And I left 30 years ago in 1993 when right at post-Soviet collapse. So, and at that time, every time I come to visit my mother, who lives in Tiraspol, in Transnistria, I hear on TV like absolutely stunning, information coming from Russian television. And only now, when the war started, I understood I lost my mother, I lost my aunt, I lost all of my first cousins except of 3. And anything that could be done, how do you transfer perception of these people who basically were poisoned over decades of this terrible information? How do you go from there? And I think it's a big part of women also, because a lot of young population in Russia also misinformed. And it's really hard to talk to them, and they try all the time. Any thoughts?
Currently, after the war started in Ukraine, a lot of Russians flee to Georgia.
I'm aware.
You're aware of this, a lot.
Of course.
And just simply, my question is, not a question, but solution is, when you don't have a alternative information source, when you don't count the human right, when you don't want to listen to somebody's opinion, and it goes dictate. Dictatorships, that's how it's ruled. We see that it goes to North Korea, it goes Syria, it goes to Russia. But my question is, it goes to Belarus. My question is, to those Russian young guys, if I'm Ukrainian capable of get the stake again and go against my own government, who decides to be a little funny and wants be a ruler or dictator, or don't they want to defend their own country, own families, own voice? As the United States, the Second Amendment that bears the right to have a weapon, to in case you have some crazy dictator. Don't you want to defend their country? No, because again, Soviet mentality destroyed entire Russia's population. I'm not saying Russia was bad, no. There's a great population they have, but their mentality wasted. Wasted so bad, it was the Tsar period and communist period, they twisted so badly that whoever's in charge, he's a god. The rest of you are nothing, you just listen to him. And that's so military especially.
It's a fact,
Yeah.
It is
So-
how it is, but how to move on from this, how to turn it around.
Information, institutions, free institutions, press, person, education. Why is everybody rushing to the US to get, better life, spend their money, having nice houses, and going back? I mean, they have more resources than US have. Why don't they build in their country better economy and better life? Again, twisted mentality right now. This is not their fault, this follows all these periods of times. But again, solution is press, information, institutions, but will they let them in? You say no, because they're executing everybody and not doing this right. This is my opinion.
I'll answer briefly as well. Actually, in school, I studied security and military studies with a focus on information operations. So I did a lot of work on exactly how Russia utilizes its propaganda and why disinformation has become so prevalent over the last few decades. And I think my answer would be, Russia takes advantage of where there are information vacuums, and Russia takes advantage because they have a numerical advantage. And that's not just something that we see on the battlefield with, just having more mass of humans that they put on the front line, but it's also something they take advantage of in the information and in the online space. It's kind of what we call like the fire hose theory, which is they just dump so many things online that it's really, really hard for accurate information to fight back every single false claim, because we find ourselves playing whack-a-mole with the types of false claims, and it's really hard to discern. And the West has not put the same resources into having, bot farms that they have, like in St. Petersburg, of hundreds of people in basements that are typing these tweets out, and we haven't had the same resources to even keep up. But I think one of the things that each and every one of us can do is understand that we as individuals are also one drop in the ocean of, the Western and democratic information space. And the more that we're passive online, on our social medias, on Twitter, on Facebook, the more that we're not putting our voices out there, it creates the vacuum for them to put their voices. And so it's one thing for you to be scrolling through your Twitter and seeing a post that's clearly Russian disinformation saying, something crazy about Ukraine, and to be like, wow, well, I don't agree with that. That's awful, that's misinformation, and then scroll on. It's a completely other thing to actively post, to be proactive, to make your voices heard, because I also think there's a power in community, and I think that people that are on the fence and don't really understand and don't really have access to real information, if they don't see that people around them support Ukraine, if they don't see that people around them are debunking those narratives, then that vacuum is going to be filled by Russian propaganda. And so being as active as you can in your own communities, posting about it proactively so that it's not, our voices don't get drowned out by Russian bots, and also having conversations with the people around you. Because again, human to human connection, part of the reason why we're here is because talking to another human and telling them, that this is wrong, that this is the correct information, that, you talk to Ukrainians firsthand and they told you this and that, is really important, and even can be sometimes difficult, challenging a little bit the people around you that might be consuming the wrong information. I know it's difficult and I know it's uncomfortable sometimes to have these conversations, but I think that's one of the parts of democracy, that it is difficult and it is uncomfortable, and we have intellectual curiosity and we have these discussions, and that's something that Russia doesn't have. They're very comfortable because they don't have these conversations. So challenging yourself also to push a little bit and make sure that in your community, if you hear someone, at a barbecue somewhere saying something, don't just internalize that and say, oh, well, that's a shame that they have, that they consume disinformation, and stay in your own corner. Like, try to be as proactive, because otherwise authoritarian propaganda is going to fill that space. So we want to make sure we take up as much as we can.
It's taken. I feel like I'm fighting a life.
It's exhausting.
Last 3 years, it's like my mom still doesn't believe that Bucha is real. So actors.
It's a, I mean, we're not here for saving Russia, for sure, so.
No,
Yes,
I mean,
I'm trying to, when a person drowning in the water and saying that God help me, God says, move this. So we try, and they have to try as well. Yes.
My to U.S. American-Ukrainian relationship, but you as the people who've seen the war in the front line, have seen all the death and atrocities that Russia has caused, how would you recommend to support those veterans who come back from the front line? To just bring them back to life, and how do you act around them? What do you say to them? Because my brother who came back from the front line, I'm having a hard time supporting him because I don't know what's the right way to support him and what are the right words that I should say. So you as the people who've seen that would probably give us an answer how to be around those veterans who've been to the war.
But, about 30 years I've been trained for a specific day in my life. There was going to be war, to fight and be stress resistant. But even me person who I fought 5 years, Afghanistan, Iraq, Georgia, Abkhazia, Ossetia, Chechnya, Kosovo, 10 years Ukraine. I'm who've been all my life doing training to be trying to be resistant. I caught this PTSD, and young people who actually students who just because they are volunteer will to stand up for what's right to win. I understand how weak was their psychological condition, as I have been a war situation. So biggest experience in this has the United States. Unfortunately, Ukraine doesn't have it. I only can show it personal, but nobody will understand him better. Not you, not mom, not parents, nobody but his brother in arms like me. So only I would advise you. There is a lot of military communities who have had a deal to deal with this, and they know how to approach it. Because after Vietnam, Korea was these problems, but the U.S. started to work on it after Iraq and Afghanistan, and we're still having the problems. But this is important to, in time, you address a specialist, and specialist, he will always, I'm pretty sure, that he was always better, except any unknown person who's military that had ever wears a uniform is a veteran, than even the closest person from the family. So I recommend that there is a solutions. There's a U.S. veteran organizations who can help you with it. And unfortunately, Ukraine right now, we're going through this painful process we started now. In the future, we're gonna have a worse. But U.S. is currently who has biggest experience in this. And I would recommend to see the veteran organizations, and they will help you out with this.
If I may just shortly add to that, one common thing that I noticed in veterans and just people in general on military side who have for some reason had to go back to civilian life is they need to see that the values that why they went to war with and why they fought, the values that they fought for are carried on in whatever capacity. That could be a project, a memory project for fallen heroes, that could be a mental health project, or anything that they can be involved where they can feel like they carry on the same values that they did on the front line. It helps a lot of people.
I'm gonna make an executive decision or a suggestion. I appreciate everybody being here. I can see the heat is getting everybody. We have maybe 15 or 20 more minutes we could talk, but I think you're ready to get out of this room and maybe go out in the courtyard, and if you have some questions, we can.
Yeah, well, I think on behalf of everybody, I want to thank you for being here. Steve, thank you so much for all of the work you do in Ukraine. I follow you on Facebook. It's always heartwarming to see your post and see your fight. Well, I did see that you tear up when you said Bucha. I've lost friends in Bucha. I'm from Kyiv, but I live in United States for 26 years. So it was a long time. I came here to do my postdoc work. Victoria, George, thank you for your service. I also I have a family member who is a drone operator in 3rd Defense Brigade. So I can relate to that. Thank you for keeping those soldiers safe to your best abilities.
Thank you.
And it's very, very impressive to see this young generation of Ukrainians, and I was one of those people who voted for independence of Ukraine in 1991. Well, thank you for being here. And one more thing, so we do have a non-profit organization, Alabama United Hearts of Ukraine. There is a group on Facebook if you want to follow what's going on in Ukrainian community in Birmingham is very small. It's not as big as Chicago, but it's small. But it's since war started, it's got bigger, and because of refugees, and let's get more united. And we do have number of events. So if you follow on the Facebook, if you cannot participate in those events with help, just please come to those events and leave us some money and take some baked goods and borscht. That is what we usually have. Usually we also have a great choir director who tries to keep Ukrainian culture live and presented on all of those events. So please vote with money. And Alabama United Hearts of Ukraine supports Hospitalier. So all of the funds we are raising, they are going to Hospitalier.
And you can join us too as a member.
Yeah, and you can join. Yeah, we do have several board directors here: Georgia, Ron, Luba, Alan.
That's great. Thank you, everybody. Let's